My name is Claire. I'm 41, and my husband had been gone for barely a week of his month-long business trip when the scratching started in the basement. It wasn't loud at first, just a faint, irregular thump here and there. I tried to ignore it, but that night it grew louder, more insistent. I was alone in the house, pacing between the hallway and kitchen, debating whether I was overreacting or about to be ambushed by something with claws and bad intentions. Lucas, my son, was away for the weekend on a ski trip with his girlfriend. But I remembered something he mentioned weeks ago. "Ethan's really good with this kind of stuff," he'd said casually. Ethan, my stepson. 25, tall, quiet, and surprisingly handy. He lived across town in an apartment he rarely left except for work and gym sessions, but we'd always gotten along. Polite exchanges, the occasional shared laugh at Lucas's expense. So I called. "Hello." His voice was cautious when he picked up. I had used my landline, probably not in his contacts. "Ethan. It's Claire, Lucas's mom." I tried to sound calm, but the nerves laced my words. "Sorry to call you like this. I wouldn't if it weren't weird, but there's something in the basement. I think it's an animal, and I'm kind of losing it." To my surprise, he didn't hesitate for long. "I'll be right over," he said. I was already on the front porch when he pulled into the driveway. My arms folded, sweatshirt sleeves tugged over my hands. I hadn't even thought about what I looked like, just that something in the house felt unsettled. He stepped out of the car, tall and steady as ever, a small reassuring presence in the gathering dusk. "Thank God," I exhaled with a nervous laugh. "Sorry. I know this is not exactly the kind of thing you signed up for when your dad married me." He smiled. "No problem." I handed him a headlamp and gloves, tried to act like this wasn't completely ridiculous, and joked, "Just promise me you won't get rabies." His grin widened. "I'll do my best." I waited upstairs, heart pacing every time I heard a creak from below. But eventually the noises stopped. The basement door opened, and Ethan emerged dusty but triumphant. "Raccoon," he said, accepting the glass of lemonade I held out like it was a trophy. We sat on the back porch, the sun dipping behind the trees, the air finally quiet. I felt myself breathe again. "Lucas is out all weekend," I told him, half apologizing. "And I thought I'd use the time to finally clean out the basement. Guess I got more than I bargained for." He didn't ask questions. He just listened, laughed when I mentioned the volleyball injury I still felt in my shoulder every time it rained, asked about the old guitar in the corner when I told him it had belonged to my father before Alzheimer's took most of his memory. That first evening ended with nothing more than conversation and lemonade. But it lingered, something about the ease of it. After that, I noticed he'd wave whenever he came by. Sometimes he'd come early when Lucas and his girlfriend were running late, and I'd ask if he could help with something. Moving a box, unsticking a window, pulling something from the attic. It was small at first. Just errands. Just favors. But slowly it shifted. One afternoon I was struggling with the kitchen cabinet door, and I called, "Ethan? Can you give me a hand?" Lucas was upstairs with his headset on, completely lost in a game. Ethan followed me into the laundry room and fixed the hinge without fanfare. I insisted on feeding him afterward like always. Sandwiches, leftover pasta, grilled fish. Felt normal. Felt nice. Over time we talked more. I told him about my daughter Melanie, now living across the country after finishing grad school. About how things had been hard after Lucas's father passed, and how I buried myself in work just to stay afloat. He never pressed, just listened, patient, steady, warm. One afternoon we were planting lavender along the side fence. We were both down on our knees, dirt under our nails, sun warm on our backs. I brushed hair from my face and left a streak of soil across my cheek without realizing it. He laughed gently. "You've got something," he said, reaching forward. His thumb grazed my cheek, wiping it away. It froze only for a second. Our eyes locked. He paused, smiled. Something shifted in the air between us. Nothing was said, but it was there. A flicker of something we weren't supposed to name. Later that day, as he stood by the sliding glass door about to leave, I found myself hesitating. "You've been really good to me, Ethan," I said softly. He didn't answer right away, just looked at me, quiet, steady, and nodded. And somehow, I knew we'd both felt it. Shrug. "It's nothing." But it wasn't. Ethan didn't press, and I didn't elaborate. But that night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the way his hand brushed mine when we both reached for the same tea towel. About how his laugh lingered a little too long after I told that ridiculous story about Lucas falling asleep during his final exam. And that look, brief but unmistakable, like he was seeing me in a way he wasn't supposed to. Like he didn't want to but couldn't help it. From that moment on, we both knew something had started. We didn't name it. Not yet. It felt like standing at the edge of something vast and silent, toes curled over the cliff, waiting to see if the other would jump. But neither of us had wings. It was a Thursday evening when it shifted again. Lucas had gone out with his friends, some trivia night at a brewery, and Ethan had come by earlier to help me move boxes from the attic. Nothing major. Just decorations, old linens, bins marked Melanie, college. We worked for about an hour, passing boxes down the attic ladder. Dust spun through the warm slant of light from the attic window, and the air was thick with quiet nostalgia. Afterward, I poured us each a glass of wine, and we ended up sitting on the floor of the living room, backs against the couch. One of the old boxes had burst open, years-old Halloween costumes spilling across the carpet. Ethan picked up a floppy witch's hat and shoved it on his head sideways. I laughed so hard I snorted, then clamped a hand over my mouth, horrified. But he just smiled at me, like he liked hearing it. The laughter faded eventually, replaced by the kind of conversation that feels like unraveling something soft and private. We talked about music, about regrets, about how life never turns out quite the way you think. I told him how Lucas's dad used to look at me like I was magic, until one day he just didn't anymore. "People drift," I said. "Sometimes you don't even notice until the space between you is too wide to fix." He didn't interrupt, just looked at me like he wanted to fill that space. I turned to him then. His wine glass was dangling loosely from his fingers, forgotten. His legs stretched out beside mine, and in the dim lamplight, I noticed how the gold in his eyes mirrored the softness in mine. He looked at me, and I looked right back. It didn't last long, that look, but it didn't need to. I leaned in first, slowly, giving him space to pull away if he needed to. But he didn't. Our lips met softly. Once, then again, deeper, longer. His hand found my cheek, fingers warm, tracing the line of my jaw like he was trying to memorize it. My wine glass tipped and rolled onto the carpet beside us, unnoticed. There was no urgency, just a quiet unfolding. Something long buried breaking the surface. He pulled back first, breath catching. "This is dangerous," I whispered. "I know," he said, but neither of us moved away. That night he didn't stay over. He left after midnight. We hadn't crossed that final line. Not yet. But something had cracked open between us, and we didn't close it. The days that followed were full of a quiet tension. Not awkward, just charged. The kind that lives in the space between two long glances and subtle silences. He still came by. Still helped with things around the house. But I noticed the way his eyes lingered longer when I passed him in the kitchen. The way my perfume clung a bit stronger to the robe I wore. The way I brushed his wrist when I handed him a dish. Just a beat too long. The first time we really crossed a line, fully, deliberately, came about a week later. And it wasn't clumsy. It wasn't shameful. It felt inevitable. Like something we'd both needed for far too long. And for a little while afterward, I waited for the guilt. But it never came. There was no storm, no chaos. Just a strange peace. A rhythm that felt dangerous. But natural. We didn't talk about what it meant. Not directly. But the way he held my hand beneath the table, the way his expression softened when Lucas wasn't looking, that said enough. Sometimes I'd leave the back door unlocked, casually, as if it didn't mean anything. But we both knew it did. The house changed after that. I started playing softer music, slower songs with strings and quiet pianos. I wore robes that barely clung to my body and let them stay loose. When he arrived, I smiled from the kitchen like it was always supposed to be this way. We never talked about the future. Never used words like love. It wasn't that kind of story. It was quieter, older. Something that bloomed not from wild lust but from stillness, from longing that had nowhere else to land. Some nights we didn't do anything at all. Just lay in bed facing opposite directions, bodies close, fingertips grazing under the blanket. He told me about his childhood. His mother, who died when he was 6. How it left him feeling like there was a hole inside him no one ever noticed. And I told him how I used to want to be a photojournalist. How I traded dreams for stability. How no one prepares you for the moment when people stop seeing you and only see the roles you fill. Wife, mother, employee, caretaker. He didn't say anything at first. Just reached over and gently ran his fingers through my hair. "You're already worth noticing," he said. Like it was the easiest truth in the world. And maybe that was the hardest part. Not what we were doing, but how easy it became. It started slowly. Early mornings when Lucas was out on runs or still asleep. Ethan would slip in quietly, sometimes parking a few streets down just in case. I'd greet him in the hallway, hair still damp from the shower, robe cinched tight at the waist. We rarely said much. We didn't have to. We just moved around each other like we'd done this 100 times already. Maybe that's what scared us most. How easy it became. But life has a way of closing in. Lucas's internship ended, and suddenly he was home every day. His presence shifted the air in the house. Ethan stopped walking through the back door. My fingers stopped hovering over the keypad. We got cautious. Visits shorter, glances tighter, touches rarer. It was like living under a roof with a leak you can't quite locate, just waiting for the drip that would expose everything. One afternoon I watched Lucas from the window. He was outside clearing out the garage, shirt off, headphones in. And for a moment, I saw Ethan in him. Same jawline. Same quiet confidence. He looked up and waved. I waved back. That night, Ethan didn't come. And the next night he didn't text. Eventually I sent him a message. Just one line. He's not going back to school next semester. He didn't respond. What was there to say? We both knew it. Something had shifted. Before, we'd been floating just outside the borders of consequence. Now Lucas was always nearby. Every door creaked louder. Every shadow felt full of teeth. Still we couldn't stop. Not yet. The next time I saw Ethan it was rushed. Lucas had gone to pick up groceries. Brief window. I opened the door and pulled him inside like the walls themselves might whisper about it. We didn't speak much. His kiss wasn't soft, wasn't romantic. It was desperate. Like we needed to remind ourselves this was real. That it had happened. After we sat in the hallway, backs to the wall, shoulders brushing. "I hate this," I whispered. "This sneaking. This waiting." "I know." I rested my head against his shoulder. "We have to be more careful." But careful wouldn't be enough. 2 weeks later it nearly came undone. He came to help with the ceiling light in the laundry room. Lucas, I thought, had gone to the hardware store. We figured we had time. I was up on the ladder, screwdriver in hand, half focused, when Ethan suddenly froze. "He's here," he said. Through the front window, I saw Lucas's car pulling in. My heart jumped. "No time," I whispered. Ethan scrambled down, wiped his hands on a rag, and bolted through the back. I heard the gate click just as Lucas opened the car door, whistling, arms full of garden soil like it was just another sunny afternoon. Like nothing was different. Like I hadn't kissed his stepbrother 10 minutes earlier. That night I called Ethan. My voice felt brittle. "I thought he'd be gone till 5. "I know," he said. "It's okay." But it wasn't. The warmth began to drain from between us, replaced by something colder, tighter. I felt it in the spaces that used to hold ease. My texts grew shorter. My voice on the phone lost its softness. I stopped brushing his arm when he passed. I didn't ask if he was hungry. I didn't ask if he missed me. I didn't need to. He already knew what I wasn't saying. We can't keep doing this. The last time I saw him like that, I handed him a jar of local honey I'd picked up at the market. Our fingers touched briefly, but it didn't feel like an invitation. Felt like a goodbye. The unraveling wasn't dramatic. There were no slammed doors or final words, just silence that grew roots. We stopped texting every day. He stopped coming by unless Lucas was around. Even then, the air felt thin. Polite. Practice. I removed the spare key from beneath the mat. Not that he would have used it. I stopped reaching out first. When he did, I replied slower, warm but not warm. Careful. Some afternoons I'd catch him driving by, or I'd see him walking past with headphones in. Other times I'd be on the porch with Lucas, watering herbs or unpacking groceries. Ethan would pass by. I'd wave. He'd wave back. That was all. And maybe that's all it was ever meant to be. The worst part wasn't the loss of the touches or the kisses or the early mornings. It was losing the way he used to look at me. Like I was the only one in the room who saw him. And in turn I felt seen. Not just as Lucas's mother. Not just the woman who held everything together. But as Claire. Bright. Worn. Real. For a little while, he was the only one who saw that version of me. Now I was just Claire again. Lucas's mom. The woman who once needed help with a raccoon. There was no final scene. No words said through tears. Just quiet. Few weeks later I saw them at the grocery store. Lucas was pushing the cart. I was laughing at something he said, the kind of light laugh you learn to practice. Ethan turned the corner, and our eyes met. He nodded. He nodded back. And that was it. That night, I sat alone in my kitchen, lights off, wine untouched, thinking about how quiet endings always echo the longest. Ethan never asked if I missed him. And I never asked if he thought about me. Because those are the kinds of questions that demand answers. And we'd already said all we could. We couldn't afford to. Sometimes late at night when the house is quiet and Lucas is asleep down the hall, I still remember the way he said my name. Softly, like it meant something. I remember how his hand would rest on my back, light and warm, as if he needed no reason at all. I wonder if he ever thinks about those moments. But I don't ask. Life kept moving. Lucas was around more now. Present, engaged, thoughtful in ways I hadn't seen in years. The house settled back into a kind of rhythm, the predictable kind that makes time blur. From the outside it probably looked like happiness. And maybe, in some quiet way, it was. I stopped trying to untangle it. Ethan never reached out again. And I didn't either. He picked up more hours at the bookstore, I heard through Lucas. Took long drives on weekends. Let his hair grow out. Mentioned once, in passing, that he might leave the city next year. I smiled when I heard it, even if it hurt. We don't talk anymore. Sometimes when I pass near his part of town, I wonder where he is. What he's doing, who he's with. And sometimes, just sometimes, I catch a glimpse of him walking past our house, headphones in, coat collar turned up. Once, I saw him glance toward the window. He didn't stop. He didn't wave. But I felt it. And other times I'll be reading by that same window, book in hand, tea cooling beside me, and I'll feel his gaze before I see him. And when I do, when our eyes meet for that fraction of a second, smile. Barely. But enough. And he smiles back. That's all. But it's enough to know. He remembers too. And somehow that's the part one carry with me. The knowing. The quiet echo of something we weren't meant to hold, but did for a while. And that's ours.